This is the OER and Open Textbook Workshop on March 31st, 2011 for Mount Royal University. It has been organized by Rod Corbett, and so I'm going to turn over the microphone to Rod for a few minutes to tell us about the program at Mount Royal.
Okay. One of the reasons that we're interested in talking with you today about this is that in the last little while, we've been having a renewed focus on copyright legalities and the implications of copyright laws up here in Canada and how they influence our use of content in our courses. That's right across the map on the university, online courses, blended courses, face-to-face courses. And so it's one of the reasons we've got one of the librarians here. So our interest in using open source content, like open textbooks, has been reinvigorated because of the shift, because we want to use content, but we want to make sure we're legal in using it. And so we're interested in promoting the use of these kind of materials a lot more in the future. And so, but we also need to learn a lot more first. So that's sort of what we're here for.
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting us. As the screen says, my name is Jacky Hood. I'm the director of the College Open Textbooks Project. It's funded by the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. We just passed our 3rd anniversary, and we're specifically looking at open textbooks for the first 2 years of higher education for community colleges and for other 2-year colleges. So I'm not going to focus a lot on our project today because I assume Mount Royal is not only a 4-year college but also has graduate schools. So as you can see, I got my master's at Carleton. I lived in Canada for 10 years. I worked at Bell Northern Research in a company called Lee Instruments as a circuit designer and a project engineer and so on. I've only been to Alberta twice, and I've never been to Calgary, but I'm so glad to be there today, at least virtually. And I'll give you all a chance to introduce yourselves in a few minutes. I think Rod has Illuminate down pat, so I'm not going to go through this slide. Okay, so I see you don't have graduate schools. Okay, well then you can send people down here to Stanford and back to Ottawa U and Carleton University and so on as well. Okay, so first I'm going to do is just give you a little briefing so you'll have a context about what Open OER is and what open textbooks are. And then I will just talk a little bit about their benefits, and then I will have you introduce yourselves. I know Rod went through who was in the room, but I was busy fussing with the microphone and so on and didn't have a chance to do that. Generally, I'm going to be using the handset. Actually, I will go back to this for a minute. If you're not able to interrupt me, by all means, somebody raise this hand. It's under the list of participants with a green arrow, and then it'll flash at me, and you'll get my attention, and I'll be quiet and let you interrupt. So with that, here we go. And then after you introduce yourselves, we'll get into the depth of how to find and use open resources. So this is my view of an instructor, and I taught customer service and project management here at the college for 6 times. That was enough, both purely online and as hybrid and as pure face-to-face. And to me, the instructor first orchestrates the music, and the music being the class, figures out weeks or months in advance what resources he or she will use. And then when the time comes on day 1, like our next Monday, day 1, 25,000 students will show up here. And then the instructor gets up on the podium with the baton and conducts the class, bringing in the resources at the right time. So I do not think of textbooks as the orchestra. Textbooks, well, people won't let me say it's the piccolos, it's maybe the whole string section, but the class is far more than the textbook. And what is an open resource? Well, first of all, what is a resource? There are all kinds of resources, the ones we showed on the previous slide. Typically, when we start talking about open resources, we're talking about the digital resources. We're not talking so much about a guest presenter who comes to the class or a field trip or a project, though some projects can be digitized, but more the pieces of textbooks, lessons, quizzes, and so on that can be stored and transmitted digitally. Now, an open resource is one that the creator has decided to share rather than locking it up as copyright, all rights reserved. So it's available for reuse. For example, when I used to teach my classes, I had to market them. Legally, I was not allowed to take, a few photocopies out of my textbook and share it in a marketing session trying to get people to come to take my class. So that sort of sharing is perfectly possible with open resources. Sometimes the adopter of the resources can modify them. So I could, if this particular photograph is open licensed, as I try to make all my photographs open licensed, I could now go and change the sign to take the E out and have it just called OPN. That would be legal in some cases. You have to look specifically at the license to find out if you can modify it. And as I said, they're normally digital. Theoretically, you could have a film-based picture or even an old document that you have to scan because it's not digital, and then you could modify it. But generally, in today's world, those resources will be digital and therefore easy to modify. There are several kinds of open licenses. The most general one is public domain. Either the copyright has expired or the author or creator has made it public domain from day one. And with public domain, you do not even have to give attribution to the creator. So theoretically, you could claim that you wrote Jane Austen's books, but it would probably be career limiting. However, it is not illegal to do that. Creative Commons, and I should have made a capital C, is the most common, and excuse the pun, way of open licensing, and there are a number of options. And so you'll notice at the bottom that my slides are Creative Commons licensed. It's very small. It says CC BY, which means all you need to do to use these slides is give me credit for them, and then you can use them, you can modify them, you can even sell them. So all that's required with CC BY is that you give me credit for having created them. And similar, of course, you have to look at the licenses on the photographs as well, because those are not mine. And then some writers and some creators of well, obviously, almost all the software creators use the software licenses. GNU licenses are pretty common. But even some documentation is put under a software license, and there's a specific software license called GFDL. The GNU free documentation license is pretty common, especially for books in business and computer science. And then some authors do a custom license. They say, oh, you can use this in not-for-profit institutions of higher education, but not the for-profit ones, or something strange like that. Or you can use this west of the Mississippi, but not east of the Mississippi, or whatever. We discourage custom licenses because they're very difficult for the adopters to deal with. So here are some of the examples of the kinds of open resources you can find to use in your classes. And why would you want to use open resources? Well, first of all, you have limited time to prepare your class materials. You've got all those other things you have to do. And yet the students are used to having lots of rich media everywhere they look. So you can use open rich media without paying copyrights or securing permission if they've been open licensed. So you can use videos and soundtracks and all kinds of other things if they're open licensed. This will, of course, it will engage your students. They'll be more interested in your lectures and in your presentations and your projects and your homework assignments. Certainly saves you time. It also allows you to tap talent that you don't have. You're probably not the world's best photographer, a movie maker, or perhaps you're not the world's best software developer. And so you can tap other people's talent, and then you can stay out of jail. Now, typically, individual teachers and professors are not sued for copyright, but you could be halfway through a class and have a cease and desist order to tell you to stop using some materials, and then you'd have to scramble around and find something else. So it's a pretty good idea to stay away from taking copyrighted materials and just sticking it into your learning management system and hoping you don't get caught. Another very important reason to use especially open textbooks is the students are paying a lot of money. We're looking at hundreds of dollars in textbook costs every year, every term for students, and the prices just keep going up and keep going up. So that's another strong reason for you to consider open textbooks. They also weigh a lot, and this isn't a difference so much between open and copyright as between digital and non-digital. The non-digital ones are very heavy. Now, the majority of students still want an open textbook to be bound, or any textbook to be bound. 75% in a survey that was done last summer of community college students. And that includes net generation. They want bound textbooks. But they'd also like to be able to leave them at home and just check the formulas the last minute before the test on their mobile device. So this is an argument for digital as opposed to an argument for open, but the majority of open materials are digital. Now the instructor has this dilemma. He or she does want to use a good textbook, but when they look at the McGraw-Hill and Pearson and Macmillan and the Wiley, all the other textbook companies, they find nothing fits exactly the way they teach. So they say, oh gosh, I not only have to require an expensive textbook, I really ought to require 3 expensive textbooks so I can get 5 chapters from this one and 1 from that one and 2 from that one. And the students don't like it. They don't like getting sent hither and yon. If the teacher decides to abandon the textbook and just use websites, I know because I did that. The students complain a lot about having to jump around. You give them a textbook and say use 5 chapters out of 30 chapters and they paid $150. They don't like that. And it's very, very difficult at the same time to figure out what's legal, what's not legal. And so the teacher ends up saying, oh gosh, in spite of all the problems from a commercial textbook, at least I feel safe if I use a commercial textbook. So what a dilemma. Open textbooks can help with this dilemma. So an open textbook is digital and modular, typically. It's adaptable in most cases, and it's low cost to the students. And the low cost is not only that it's free for those who have computer systems and internet access, and that's not always a given. It can often be printable for just a small fee. We do find, however, that to print a fairly large textbook at the local copy shop or the print shop at the university will cost more than ordering the bound textbook. And many of the open textbooks are available in bound form. We've seen some color ones as high as $60, but the range is usually more like $10 to $40, and that is 20% or less of the cost of a commercial textbook. And so again, an open textbook has been changed from copyright all rights reserved to copyright some rights reserved. This webinar is too short to explain all the options. I'll be happy to send you, provide you some information about what the other options are under some rights reserved. And then this is pretty small, but some of the benefits, you can use a module in many different places. For example, if you were to write a biographical sketch of Louis Pasteur, and you put it in a $300 textbook, not even you can use it again as the writer. The publisher owns the copyright. Whereas if you write that and make it open licensed, it can be used all the way from 4th grade to medical school. So the audience for that little biographical sketch becomes much larger. So we really become much more efficient in our use, in our creation of educational resources. We can adapt these for geographies and so on. We only need to provide what's needed. If you're only using 6 chapters, that's all the students need to print. those authors and creators who have created open textbooks and open resources say they get much better, much faster feedback than when they had to have feedback routed through a publisher. You get the entire global community. We have about a third of our visitors are from China, huge market that can help us improve open textbooks. Furthermore, you may go and look and say, oh my goodness, I can't find a good enough open textbook in my field. But you should still advocate for them, because if the student doesn't have to pay for an expensive algebra book, then maybe he can afford to take your class where you do have an expensive textbook. So it's in your interest to promote open textbooks, even if you can't find one for your classes. Promote those. Math has lots of them. Computer science and business have huge numbers. So advocate that those open textbooks be used at Mount Royal. And then if you're in anthropology, which doesn't have very many good ones, you can continue to use an open textbook, and ultimately more students will be able to afford to take your class. Okay, that's kind of the benefits. And then a big question I get, and this is my last slide before I have you introduce yourselves, is how is it possible? How is it possible that a good textbook can be available for $10 when its competitive textbook from a textbook company is worth, it's going to cost $110? Well, there's various ways that quality textbooks get created. One is the big nonprofit foundations are very much wanting us to have open textbooks throughout the world and open resources throughout the world. An example, the Shuttleworth Foundation from England and South Africa funded the free high school textbooks out of South Africa. And in North America, those are college-level textbooks. They're high school textbooks in South Africa, but they're college-level textbooks, at least lower division college-level textbooks here. Hewlett Foundation, Gates Foundation, Lumina, Wallace, many of the big foundations are funding open textbooks to be written. Now, the authors get paid a stipend. They don't get royalties. They get a stipend. They work for hire, which the next bullet says. They're paid to write the textbook. And this is not at all unusual in industry. My husband has a dozen patents. He gets paid for his time to do the invention. He gets a small honorarium for inventing it, but he doesn't get royalties on the things he has invented. We are starting to see departments writing textbooks. So the math department at the College of the Redwoods in Northern California has written 2 math textbooks and open licensed them. Words and Numbers is a for-profit textbook factory, and they build textbooks. They find authors and photographers and so on, and they have a lot of employees who are technologists, and they are hired by both the publishers and by the foundations, the publishers to write copyright textbooks, and the foundations to write open textbooks. So we have these textbook factories. In addition, like open source software, some companies are starting to do open source with a for-profit model where they give away the textbooks and then they charge for the bound copies and they charge for ancillaries and support. Another way that companies can, as I mentioned, you can charge for the bound copies, but you can do that on a print-on-demand basis. And one of the ways that the college bookstores are buying into the idea of digital and open textbooks is to replace those bookshelves with a print-on-demand machine that will produce a nice bound textbook in about 10 minutes. So the students can come in, decide they want to take the class, and walk out with a textbook that was just created for them. And then another way is the crowdsourced method. And a lot of people think all open textbooks and all digital textbooks are built on the wiki type of crowdsourced method. That's not so common. And we really encourage, if there is one, like the Chem Wiki chemistry books, that it be heavily moderated by experts in the field so that we're sure that what's going in there is good information. Okay, with that, I would like to turn it over to you, and I guess Rod can hand you the mic. As each of you tell me who you are and what your role is. Are you an instructor or a librarian or an instructional designer or an instructional technologist? And I'll type it onto the screen. And I'm going to mute my phone so you don't hear my keyboard. So Rod, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, well maybe I'll start because I'm not sure I spoke a lot about what I'm doing. My main role here is as a faculty developer with a focus on learning technology, so primarily online technology. We're a Blackboard shop here at Mount Royal University, and so we have a lot of courses that are in Blackboard with a lot of content coming from lots of different sources that populate those. In addition to textbooks, I mean, we certainly have a thriving industry of overpriced textbooks or bookstore here too. So, okay, so let's see. Catherine?
Sure. So my name is Catherine Bonnet, and I'm a librarian here at Mount Royal. I also have a responsibility with respect to ebook content in our library collections. I will, in addition, be the acting collection coordinator for the library for next year. I have an interest in open textbooks, in part because I agree with a lot of what you said about the cost and the inconvenience factor of textbooks. I will also be teaching a general education course on the information society next fall, and do not plan to use a textbook, a printed textbook or course back under any circumstances.
Andrew? My name is Andrew from the Academic Development Center. My job is to help faculty with technology problems. So faculty would find open objects and textbooks that they'd like to use. It would be my job to help them put links to them in the guide process.
So I'm sorry, but
I think maybe you were a little too close to the mic. If somebody could repeat your name, at least.
Can you hear me now? Is it clear enough? Can you hear me now? Good.
Well, that was Andrew Reel. He's trying to speak up so the microphone can pick him up.
Okay, I'm Andrew Reel. I work in the Academic Development Center. I will be showing faculty members how to link their phone drive.
Oh, she can still hear us. We just can't hear her. Hang on.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I juggled the speakerphone wrong. Okay, so we need to back up a little bit. The gentleman who said he's with the Development Center, if he could start again. I'm really sorry about this.
Okay, I'm Andrew Reel. I'm with the Academic Development Center. It'll be my job to show faculty members how to link from their website to these materials.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Leon. I'm a business faculty member, and I'm involved in teaching a staff class, which is common to all first-term business students. So we run about 30 sessions a year, and we have a hard time finding an appropriate textbook. So I'm trying to convince my colleagues to co-write an open source one.
Oh, great. That's good news. Okay, anyone else?
No, that's it. We were hoping for a couple more, but they haven't arrived yet. So I don't think they will at this point.
Okay, and could I just one more time ask the name of the man in the development center? First name?
Okay, Andrew.
Ah, thank you. Easy name. Okay, excellent. Gives me a better idea. We have on our, we have a community of almost 1,000 people. We'll be 1,000 people by June. We're combining 2 communities. And on that community, we have a group for librarians, we have a group for researchers, we have a group for adopters, a group for authors. So I encourage you, and I'll give you the links at the end of the presentation, to join our community and then to join groups that fit your backgrounds. Okay, so we want you, what you'll be doing is trying to find open educational resources that you can use, and you have a limited amount of time, so you want to do it very efficiently. So what you don't want to do is go into Google or Yahoo or Bing and type in chemistry if you're a chemistry teacher, because you will get 130 million hits. Now, you're all probably very adept at doing better searching than that. So you'd put in chemistry textbook, open, and so on, but you'd still have a hard time finding what you needed. Much better to start in a place where you know the materials are higher quality and are open. So here's how we'd like you to do it. We'd like you to look at lists that list open resources, to look at search engines that are designed to look for open resources, and so on. So Merlot is an example of a list of open resources of all kinds. Folk Semantic is an example of a search engine and a tagger. So when if you create open works, then you can tag them as being open, and Folk Semantic will find them. Creative Commons, the licensing agency itself, also has a repository and a list on its site. SlideShare is pretty good. It's general. It's not only open, but if you put open into your search on SlideShare or Creative Commons into your search, you're more likely to pick up the slideshows that are open licensed. OER Commons is a list, and I'll be talking about that and even demoing it pretty soon. Flickr is a great source for open photographs, and there's an option there. I actually go to Google's image search and flag it as okayed for reuse, and you can also make it okayed for commercial use and so on. And 90% of the time I end up at Flickr. So I just prefer to go to Google image search and then end up at Flickr rather than going directly to Flickr. And once in a while, Picasso or another photo company comes up. This is just, what, a half dozen of dozens and dozens of places you can go. But we have limited time, so we're going to try to pick the best ones and talk about them. And again, just a little refresher on open licenses. Open licenses are not anti-copyright. They're built on copyright. And at least in the United States, and I think other countries, as soon as you write something, it's copyrighted. You don't have to take action to copyright it. So if you want it to be available to other people, you need to take action by declaring that it's public domain or getting a Creative Commons license for it. And you don't have to apply for one. You just put it onto the work that you've used. You can use, as I mentioned earlier, software licenses, or you can write a custom license. And when you're looking for things, you will be looking for these types of designations. Now we're going to be looking at 2 places where you can find open resources. One are lists and the other are repositories. Repositories are where open materials are actually stored. So that physically whoever's running that repository has the open materials on their servers. Lists, in contrast, the materials are not stored on lists. They are just pointing to repositories and to individual websites where a specific resource might be available, but it's not really a repository. It's like I create a website and I put my textbook up on it. And so for those of you who are searching for open materials, lists are more important. The repositories are obviously self-serving. They don't usually tell you about other materials outside their repository. And repositories tend to be discipline-specific or grade-level specific and so on. So as a searcher, you should be looking at lists. If you were an author, you'd care a lot about repositories because you'd want to choose the best repository. So here's some examples, and we've already talked about a few of these. Our site for first 2 years of college, open textbooks. We don't list other kinds of resources, though I admit some open courseware has kind of slipped in there, but we don't have photos and videos and so on. Creative Commons has a variety of kinds of resources, including music and things of that type. Merlot has all kinds of educational resources. OER Commons the same way, and they both have all grade levels too, from kindergarten. Well, there's not a lot of pre-literate kindergarten 1, 2 open resources, but there are some for people who don't know how to read yet. The OCW Consortium, or Open Courseware Consortium, is made up of colleges and universities around the world who've opened up their courseware, their lecture notes, their lectures in some cases, slideshows, and so on. The Student Interest Group, which advocates for low-cost resources, also has some lists on its website. Now, here's examples of places where the resources are actually stored. So if you went to one of these lists, they would in turn point to these other places, these repositories. Connections is at Rice University, one of the most important repositories. Flat World Knowledge, a for-profit publisher of open textbooks. Open Learn is in the UK, has some excellent open courseware. Orange Grove is in Florida. It's affiliated with the University Press of Florida. Wikibooks, the books on there are crowdsourced, but they are vetted and moderated. And then for high school, we have two U.S.-based organizations, CK12 and Curriki. And then I mentioned earlier the free high school science textbooks out of Africa. They're in English, and they include chemistry, physics, and math, and they're working on biology. And many of those are appropriate to the first 2 years of college, or at least the first year of college. Now, if you are creating some materials and you want to look for a repository to deposit your materials, here's a few of the criteria you might consider. What type of resources does it take? If you're doing photographs, you'd obviously want to look at something like Flickr. If you're creating courseware, you'd want to look at something, a place that stores courseware like Open Learn, or Nixty is another one for storing courseware. You want to look at what kinds of licenses. For example, Rice University will only allow materials that are CC BY. If you want your license to be more restrictive, like for example that you want it to only be used for non-commercial purposes, you cannot put your resource on Connections in that case. Disciplines. Some of the repositories are specific to science, technology, education, and math, engineering and math. Others to other disciplines. So you have to take a look at that. You want to see if that repository has a reputation for quality. For example, Lulu takes everything, and they take both copyright and open resources. You may not want to have your work associated with an organization that's rather promiscuous in what they allow to be on their site. So think about that. What formats, print options, ease of use. And also, as a developer, in some cases, you can receive some money for the print copies, so you will want to look at that as well. Here's some additional criteria. I'm not going to go through all these. These women are actually sorting apples, not computers, but the fruit. And as you can see, they're doing it in great detail. So if you're really developing an important resource like a textbook, you'd want to go into a lot of in-depth consideration of the repository that you choose. Okay, so I'm going to zero in on two lists. One is OER Commons and the other is Merlot. But before I do that, I just want to pause for a minute and see if you have any questions.
At one point, are we going to get into the open source textbooks? So far, many of these materials are excellent, and this is actually what we teach other people. We're super familiar with this, but it's the textbooks that you have in your site that we're not.
Okay, I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding what you said, but I think you said you were quite interested in open textbooks, and you asked about the open textbooks on our site. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, well we can pop over there. As I mentioned, they are for lower division. In English, there are about 1,500 open textbooks in existence. We have about 550 on our site. The others are either too low level, they're for, junior high school, middle school, lower high school, or they're for upper division. For example, I don't put diseases of the brain on my site because that's not a class anyone would take in first and second year of college. So that's a consideration when we choose open textbooks. The sites I'm going to show you now have, OER Commons has about 250 open textbooks, and Merlot has about 600 or 700. And I think I didn't show one, which is Georgia Share out of the state of Georgia. They have about 600 textbooks, and they do have some of those higher level textbooks. So that's how we choose which ones to do. So I'm happy to show you our site. Right now, any other questions before I go ahead and do these quick demos? Okay, so this, you can't see this very well, and in fact, I put the wrong sub-page. The page you want is Browse on oercommons.org. And I'm going to jump over there using application sharing and do it. But the reason I like OER Commons is we were always being asked, where's one place where I can go and get everything? People don't like to jump around to a science site and a K-12 site and a this and a that. And OER Commons is nice enough to have grade levels, primary, secondary, and post-secondary. So this is primary school, secondary school, so kindergarten through 6th, 7th grade, and then 8th grade through 12th grade. I think Ontario dropped grade 13 after I moved away. And then post-secondary higher education. They also have subject areas. You may not be able to read this, but it's arts, business, and so on. And then the type of material, including, here's textbooks, and it's about 287 textbooks on OER Commons. So what I'm going to do now is application share, and your screen will dance around for a couple of minutes while I bring this up. And what you're seeing is my email, which wasn't real bright to do that, but I will jump over to OER Commons. Okay, can you see that now?
We see it. Who does this site?
It's done by the Institute for the Study of Knowledge Management and Education, or ISKME. They're a research organization. They also work, I think, University of Michigan helps a lot with this site. It's funded by Gates Foundation and Hewlett Foundation and so on. And again, it's a list. It's not a repository. And the one you want, the button you want to push is Browse All. That's the page that I showed the slides for. And so now you may be able to see, and you can move that window around on your screen. You should now be able to see what I had on the slide, arts, business, and so on. I can no longer, I'm going to point with my mouse now. I think you can see my mouse. So pick a subject. Okay, well, I don't hear you, so I'm going to pick one. I'll pick humanity. 1,964. Okay, so here we are. This is what it looks like. I'll scoot this over a ways. So what you have, those thousands of resources. So obviously you wouldn't want to just pick up humanities. You'd want to search on something. And because the order is rather arbitrary, I think actually it's alphabetical order here. So what we have here is a resource called 100 Million Guinea Pigs. It has not been rated. That's why the stars are empty. The next one, the 100 Most Used Words in English, has been rated and received 5 stars. There's also a little bit of information here about the license. This one says you're redistributing comes with some restrictions. This one says you're allowed to remix and share what you create out of this resource. This one says read the fine print, and so on. So there's a little bit of information about the license. Now I can click on this and get more information. So here we have a complete abstract, some information about the copyright holder, the license, and so on. And then this little box with the arrow takes you to the actual resource. So when I click on this, I go out of the OER Commons site to another site where the resource is stored. And sometimes that's a big, huge PDF, and so you have to wait for it to download and so on. So usually you want to really be sure you want to jump there before you do that. It created a new tab on my Firefox. So that's how OER Commons works. I'm going to go back to the browser.
Jacky, can I ask you a question? Is there any indication about its print friendliness?
Let's try that again and make sure. And I'm going to use textbooks this time. I can't remember if they say that or not. And we have certainly discovered that even though something might have a great PDF, if you try to get a bound book made out of it, it's still the PDF may go into the binding. And so you have to look at two kinds of print. One is for unbound and the other is for bound. So let's pick Advanced Algebra. It's a CA, I think that means a California textbook, not a Canada textbook. And so it's Henry Felder and so on and so on. Secondary school. Media format is downloadable documents. It does not say, whether you can get a bound copy or not. Now maybe when we go to the actual resource, we'd find that out. Well, it's on Connections. Connections is the Rice University repository, and most of their textbooks, there's a print-on-demand company called Coop, Q-O-O-P, that will provide you with bound textbooks based on Connections materials. Here you have the actual Creative Commons license. I mentioned earlier that Connections only accepts CC BY, so anything on Connections is going to be CC BY. You're allowed to remix and reshare and so on. So no, it didn't really answer the question about how printable it is, and you would be jumping over. And unfortunately, the wiki-based ones are pretty hard to print.
So is the Connections from Rice, is that a big repository?
Yes, it is, and it's an excellent one. They have their own version of XML. It's CNXML. And so remix is really, they call it frictionless remix, is really easy on Connections. Putting the material in there in the first place is really a pain. It's just like any database. If it's hard to put in, it's easy to get out. If it's easy to get out, if it's easy to put in, it's hard to get out. So Connections is definitely a case where the authors have to do a lot of work, but the users have a big benefit from that. And then they are available as bound textbooks. Okay, I'm going to close this one and jump over to Merlot, which I had a slide for that, but I'm not going to go back to my slides. Merlot, the reason I call them my second favorite is they have this absolutely dreadful first page, home page, with that silly scrolling nonsense. So what I do as soon as I get to Merlot is I jump immediately to advanced search materials. And that's what I showed on the slide. And the really great thing about Merlot is two things. They have 80,000 users. They have excellent peer reviews, and they have this incredible advanced search. And you can see that you can search on keywords, title, URL, description. Community includes things like agriculture, biology, but really some of us would call that subject. And then you can do categories like education, humanities. So I sort of a fine line between community and category. Languages. Let's see if I can go over how many languages there's.
Indicate that textbooks?
Language. I'm sorry.
In the material type, does it indicate textbooks?
Definitely. The material types include courseware. It kind of goes up to the top of my screen. I'll scroll back up and see if I can get it to come on. So they have case studies and so on, and then they actually have textbooks.
We saw it.
I think they might have books. I did see it, okay. All right. it may be up at the top. Oh, I see, open textbook, yes. Okay, so I think they have about 600 open textbooks. So we'll search on open textbooks, see what number comes up. So 1,603 results, so more than I thought, of open textbooks. And again, much like what we had on OER Commons, there's a rating system. There's also an indication if there's a peer review, and they have very rigorous peer reviews. They assign 2 reviewers to every item, and then those 2 peer reviewers will submit their review to an editor who acts as a third person involved. And so the peer reviews are useful. They have collections so that you can go in and mark the books you want if you become a member. You can use both of these sites without registering or logging on, unless you want to start writing on the site. Then you have to get a registration if you want to do reviews or if you want to create a collection. And much again like OER Commons, when I open up this book, I get more information. I'm still on the Merlot site. I get more information about the book. When it was added, who added it, and in fact it was added by Judy Baker, who's my boss. Some audiences, the licensing, the language, and so on. And then, of course, you can go to the material, just like on OER Commons. You jump then to the actual book on the actual site or repository where it's stored. So that's in this particular one. You can order it from Google Books. You can download it, and so on. Okay, so you wanted to see our site. I'll jump over to it. Again, I hadn't planned to do that because I know that your college is more than open, more than first and second year. This is our site, and of course it's going to be slow. I actually had it open. So we have a news feed from our blog over here on the right, and our open textbooks are listed under this full right menu called Open Textbook Content, Open Textbooks by Subject, and then we have them grouped into art, biology, business, and so on. So I'll just jump over here to computer science, and you'll see there is a very large number of computer science books, open textbooks.
Is your site
lots and lots.
Is your site the first 2 years of college, or does it include high school?
Well, we include some high school books because we have remedial in community colleges. So you will see books, especially advanced placement high school books that that we use here in college. So that's the story. You will see some high school books because we need them. And I mean, a lot of students take algebra, and I took algebra in 8th grade. So a student who wasn't taking math through junior high school, and suddenly has to take math, is going to be taking algebra or even arithmetic. So we do include those. Now, if I go to another subject, let's take more of the humanities do not have as many books. Here's art. That's not humanities, but it's fine arts, or some people would call it humanities. So we don't have as many for art. We have, I'm going to blow this up a little bit, maybe a dozen books for art. Some of them are photography.
Were you saying that there's a bunch of science textbooks that are coming soon?
Yes. Okay, so yeah, I'll jump over. I think we have science in several categories. We have biology separately. Chemistry's pretty good. I'm pushing on our chemistry department. I did a search for some private colleges, and there's 2 really good chemistry books. One's ChemWiki out of UC Davis in California. We have physics further down, and so on. And yes, the Michelson Foundation, with help from Gates and Hewlett, are developing 2 biology books, a biology book for majors and a biology book for non-majors, and those are both going to be publisher quality textbooks. They're spending $500,000 on each textbook getting it developed, so those will be really excellent. And then they're also doing sociology, physics, and one more that I can't think of at the moment. And then next year they're going to do 15 more textbooks. So there's a lot coming in the pipeline. Just real quickly before I leave this site, we have had, out of those 550 textbooks, we've had about 130 of them reviewed. And we review them in depth, 11 criteria against each chapter. And so you can jump to the reviews. Back on the textbook listing, you can tell if a book has been reviewed. And then the other thing we do is we hired 2 different accessibility companies, Knowbility and Virtual Ability, to do accessibility reviews. So this is how well they work with text-to-speech readers and how well the pictures are captioned and so on. You can see this is a graphical representation of perceivability, operability, and so on from an accessibility point of view. So that's kind of our site and how it works. So I'm going to jump back to my list of lists. So here's just kind of a summary. OER Commons, excellent site. Merlot, excellent site. College Open Textbooks is good if you're looking at the lower division, but we don't include a lot of lower level, say junior high school type of books, and we don't include a lot of upper division books as well. Okay, that's pretty much all I had, and there's 5 minutes left. I have a little quiz here for you, if your group wants to chime in with some answers.
Can I ask a question about the ones at your site? If people wanted to get them printed, do you have a mechanism where that could happen, and are they print friendly?
Those 550 books are on all different repositories. Half of them are on the individual author's own sites, 250 of them. So there's almost as many answers as there are books. All we're doing is listing them, pointing to them, and reviewing them. We don't store them, we don't print them, and so on. At one time, I wanted to put a button on our site to send a book to the print-on-demand vendors, and that's why I tell you, we tried. And what happened is if the author has not formatted it to be bound and printed, it won't work. So, unfortunately, the answer is you got to go down and find out. Now, our reviewers will comment on that in the review. They'll say, you know, I wouldn't use this book in my class because it doesn't have a bound version or something like that. So you can tell a lot by looking at the review.
Could I make a recommendation that I think that's going to be very popular, is to have an icon saying print friendly, not print friendly, because many students will want to print these.
But when you talk about print, you're talking about printing on a printer as opposed to ordering a bound copy?
No, bound copy. Like, you have, everything can be printed on a printer, whether or not they can get a bound copy or not.
Okay, let me just jump over and see if that's one of our criteria. I think we have a criteria for media. And one of the things on Merlot is you can say, I want to see everything about geology that works on an iPad, or I want everything that works on, BlackBerry. Unfortunately, the answers are usually there aren't very many that run on those devices. So I'll just take a quick look at our reviews and see if we have that. I think what we have is the media as a criterion, and so if there's a lot of media available, then it gets high marks on media. Okay, so we have a criteria called no, I guess we don't have one for that, but you've got a point. We should have both. We should have, is it printable, like can you turn on your printer and run it off, and is a bound copy available? And more of the authors are now making bound copies available because they make a little bit of money off of those. Okay, well, because we're out of time, I'm just going to answer these questions for you quickly. The first one, the answer is that they are stored on repositories. And so the lists do not have the actual resources. They're only on the repositories. Lists are of most use to adopters and users, whereas repositories are of most use to the creators. And the other thing that we see a lot is a lot of people equating digital with open, and they are not the same thing. There are millions of copyright, all rights reserved digital materials. And similarly, it isn't required that an open item be digital. You can go down to the local bookstore and buy a Jane Austen book that's public domain, and it's not digital. It's just a bound book. So they are not the same thing, so just to differentiate there. And then as far as OER business models, it can be work for hire, or department writing a book, or it could be advertising supported, it can be making money off the bound copies and so on. And then grant funded is a very popular business model as well. My last slide is a list of resources. And I have a notepad file here, and I'm just going to paste that right there into the chat. So now you have all those live links, and I will, when we archive this presentation, anybody who's watching this presentation can click on those live links. It won't work to click on them in the whiteboard, but if you can click them in the chat, they will work. I mentioned our community is collegeopentextbooks.ning.com, and our website is collegeopentextbooks.org. I don't have the Moodle and OER Commons sites on here, but they're just simply Moodle.org and OERcommons.org are those two websites. And I know you've been drinking from a fire hose here. I encourage you to take these tutorials, our Moodle course. If you have trouble getting into the Moodle course, let me know. I'll make sure you can get into that because it really takes 4 to 6 hours to digest this type of material, and getting it in 1 hour is much too fast.
Thank you
very much.
I think I'm done. Are you going to give us a copy of this whole broadcast or this web meeting?
Everything. In about hours will be available.
Thank you.
And I will turn off the mic So yeah, I'll send you the slides. I'll also post them up on the event on our Ning. And I'll be able to give you the link to the archive in a few hours. And that, as I mentioned earlier, will be captioned as well.